एक मिनट रुक जाओ, रेडी होने दो. चलो ये कर लेते हैं. दिस कुड बी अ ग्रेट इंट्रो.
Hi, I'm Akshay.
Hi, this is Saurabh, and you are listening to the Founder Thesis podcast. We meet some of the most celebrated startup founders in the country.
And we want to learn how to build a unicorn.
The struggle is where self-doubt becomes self-hatred. The struggle is when you are having a conversation with someone and you can't hear a word that they are saying because all you can hear is the struggle. The struggle is unhappiness. The struggle is not failure, but it causes failure, especially if you're weak.
For any science student, mu and sigma are just Greek letters, but Dhiraj can sum up the entire world between these two. Dhiraj Rajaram is the founder and CEO of Mu Sigma, the very first unicorn to come out of India. It is a company of exceptional problem solvers that is the culmination of a deeply thought conviction based on both physics and philosophy about what the world needs. In this fascinating conversation, we get a peek into the mind of one of the most enigmatic and original thinkers of India's startup ecosystem to decode how to build a unicorn without really trying to build one.
Just give me a bit about your childhood. Like, where are you from? Where did you grow up? Like your schooling, bulk of your schooling.
Grew up between Mumbai, Chembur, and Chennai. I actually grew up with my grandparents for the initial years, and then later my father was with Reserve Bank of India. He was working there, so it was a transferable job. And then my later years I spent with my parents at high school in Chennai, and then did my college in Chennai too.
How old were you by the time you like left your grandparents and like joined your father?
First 12 years, I think 10, 11 or 12 years, I was brought up by my grandfather and my grandmother.
Where they were in Chembur.
Yeah, in Chembur, Mumbai. So, by the way, my grandfather is 98 years old now. He lives with me.
Life coming full circle.
He wants to go for another 5-10 years more.
So when you moved with your father by the age of 13 or so at that stage, what were you like? Like, what do you remember about those years, as a teenager?
I would say very precocious. I used to struggle at school. Good at sports. Played cricket for my school team and went on to play cricket under 16 at multiple levels. Had difficulty following a system from the beginning. Struggled quite a bit with attention. I had what you would call a wandering mind. That was how it was. My grandmother was pretty amazing. She basically realized very early on, and she was one of my relatives told her that this kid has too much energy in him. So she had put me on lots and lots of extracurricular activities in the beginning. So I used to play mridangam. I used to, I did a little bit of singing. I did a lot of, things that typical, tambrams actually would engage in a little bit. I was, so since, when you're brought up by your grandparents, you're a little spoiled also. So I was one of those kids.
Okay. Could it be that you had what is now called ADHD, like attention deficit?
पता नहीं है ये सब लोग मुझे पता भी नहीं. I think all of these things are like over. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. I just was I didn't have an easy childhood. I can tell you that. My father struggled with alcoholism, and later we realized that he also had this thing called bipolar disorder. So it was not an easy one. But he loved us quite a bit. He had his issues, but that doesn't mean that he didn't love me and he didn't love my sister. It's one of the reasons why I was, I was brought up by my grandfather, and my mom had me when she was, 18 years old. So she was a very, very young mother, and father was 23 or something like that. So they were very young parents. So it was, and because of this issue, it made sense for my grandfather and my grandmother to take care of me in the beginning. Fun childhood in Mumbai. The typical, Mumbai building society kid playing cricket in the gullies, dancing in Ganesh Chaturthi, watching every Hindi movie I could watch. I'm a big movie buff, so I like storytelling and visual storytelling quite a bit. And then later, my mom obviously was missing the fact that she could not be with me. It was very difficult for her. So eventually, she and my father, took me to Chennai.
And Chennai was like a tough time for you, like growing up in Chennai once.
No, it was fine. It was fun. It was fun. My father wanted to be in Chennai because, initially, the reason was that Chennai had prohibition. And so we thought it could be better for him because he was there. I studied in a nice, cute school called Bharati Vidya Bhavan's Rajaji Vidyashram. I thought it was a great school, and in fact, encouraged quite a bit of lateral thinking. I loved writing, played cricket quite seriously. So it was fun times. I mean, there were issues at home, but that's not what I remember about my childhood the most.
Your father was pretty open about the fact that he was struggling with alcoholism. Like, it was not something which he was hiding.
We all knew that at home. Alcoholism is a family problem. It is not an individual problem. It affects the whole family. It affects the person for sure, but it does affect the children. It affects the wife. In fact, when you get to study it, you will know that there's something called Alcoholics Anonymous, which kind of talks about the person to be a solution for that person. But then there's something called Al-Teen for the kids and Al-Anon for the spouse. And it is not. See, the problem in India is we don't talk about issues like this and mental health quite openly. And it's a big issue. I also believe that these are all gifts. Pain is always a gift eventually. It does sculpt you. Actually, when I look back, I don't think I would be who I am without the challenges at all points of time in my life. So, जो भी होता है, eventually उसमें थोड़ा अच्छा ही होता है.
I'm trying to understand what was the pain that you were personally feeling. How did it impact your life? And
when I was in Chennai, 6th standard and 12th standard, if I told you that we shifted our house at least 8 times, because something would happen, something would go wrong. We would have some financial distress. We would have to sell a home or rent a home or move from one place to something. There was always change was a constant. I guess it was setting me up for a life of entrepreneurship in a nice way. So moving from one place to another. Also, there was a little bit of power. Sometimes he would have trouble holding the drink, and therefore he was not in a good state. So that was not easy to watch him go through that. There was a little bit of shame around, societal shame. Thoda to tha. Yeah, wo to thoda tha. And me and my sister were coping with it in different ways. She was a little younger than me. I can say that thoda gussa tha mujhme andar. I grew up angry. I can tell you that. No, angry. I don't know. Anger tha was thoda. And now he's no more. I kind of, maybe initially angry at my father, but now when I look at it, I was angry with the whole world and myself also equally. I get very emotional when I think about my father. I didn't have an understanding at that time that he was struggling and he had mental health issues, which I now know. And in fact, Mu Sigma supports a lot of, from a corporate social responsibility, we support mental health in a big way. And in fact, this Deepika Padukone thing, we support her. I think she's doing an amazing job talking about, these kind of issues. This was always there, boss, in our society. And we just need to accept it now.
Did it lead you to resolve something? Like typically, strong experiences lead you to make some resolution that I will not let such and such thing happen to me, or I will not become like so and so. Did it lead to any such resolutions?
I don't smoke. I don't drink. At Mu Sigma, it's a policy that no alcohol is allowed in any company event. So I do think subconsciously it might have led to all of this. But I didn't want to be normal. Yeah. I was comfortable not being normal. In fact, at some point, I didn't mind having a point of view and being okay about not fitting in. Well, I think at an early age that had got imprinted into my psyche.
How did that get imprinted? Like, how did having a father struggling with health issues lead you to feel that normal is not for me and I'm okay being a rebel?
My pata nahi tha. I mean, I think it was, first of all, he's one of the most creative people I know, Appa. And Amma had brought tremendous amount of love to our home. So there was a lot of time of love inside the house, but there were also times of like pain. Like neighbors always knew that there was something was wrong. That obviously that did have some impact. So I think it must have happened more at the subconscious level more than anything else.
So then by the time you were wrapping up your schooling, like, hitting your late teens, what had you thought that what would you go on to do? What would you go on to become? Like, did you have ambitions in terms of, like a lot of, maybe you wanted to become a movie star considering how much you love movies?
Yeah, no, yeah, I did play cricket seriously. Loved the game. When I was about 16 years, I had realized that I was not good enough for reaching the highest levels of the game. I could have probably played for Ranji maybe, or maybe state team, but not good enough. Like, I mean, now I'm even more sure about that because I know all the guys at that time who were better than me, and they didn't make it. My father just wanted me to settle down. He was a bank clerk. In fact, when I was after 10th standard, my father actually, unlike other fathers, my father came to me and said, "Don't aim big and all in life. Why don't you just take up this small job at LIC, which will give you they will take care of you from day one, clerical job in the beginning, and then they'll eventually make you an officer and you can do your PA or something BCom or something like that on the side. It's a safe job. It's safe." So I was kind of pissed at him, saying that, look, everybody else is like, go conquer the world, and you want me to be do anything. I mean, but it's out of love. I mean, keep in mind, it was not. He just wanted safety for me, and he just wanted me to have a safe life. And I was like, saying, no, boss, मेरे को तो करना है कुछ इधर, normal तो नहीं रहना है इधर. So I said, look, boss, though I struggled between 10th standard and 12th standard quite a bit, I just gritted my teeth and studied really, really hard. And it was not easy. Keep paying attention, sitting and doing one thing, writing questions and answers, all of those kind of things, following the rules. All of this is very difficult. So I think it required me to maybe have 5 times the effort of other people. It might have come more naturally. And being a Tambram in South India, it meant that the reservation policy against education meant that it's next to impossible to get into engineering on merit. I realized that IIT to nahi ja sakta, boss, because it's like so hard. My favorite college was BITS Pilani. I really wanted to go to BITS Pilani. And then there was College of Engineering Guindy, REC, all of these kind of things. I eventually got into College of Engineering Guindy and REC. I took College of Engineering Guindy in Anna, in Chennai, which is actually not easy to get in, frankly. It's a great school. I surprised my parents quite a bit. I could do that. I do think I got lucky also a little bit. A lot of things that really went my way. I actually, now when I look at this, right, I look at my life, I say, because there's so many times that luck has helped me. A lot of gratitude also. Important I was. I feel there are a lot of people who are much better than me, who might have not been successful, seen the kind of success. Because I recognize that actually, because I think luck has a lot of things to do in life here. Really authentic and honest, you have to recognize that.
Like, great luck for you that you got into College of Engineering Gundi. Okay.
Yeah.
And so during these 4 years of engineering, were you still staying at home, or was it now like a hostel life?
I was a hostelite. I was like free bird, first time in life. I had a lot of fun. After that, I decided I could not study the way I was studying between 10th standard and 12th standard. बहुत हो गया था, boss. And good thing that happened to me in college was met my ex-wife, Ambiga. Me and I keep saying this joke. We shared the same rank in our class. She from the top and me from the bottom. It was a single-digit rank. It's fun. I mean,
Was it like love at first sight with Ambiga?
For me, it was love at first sight. For her, she needed a little bit. She was more like a venture capitalist. She needed to check me out like really hard.
Due diligence.
ये pagal hai. It was 4 years passed very very quickly.
You were pretty bold as a young man. Like, I mean, I probably would have been among those kids who could never have gone up to a girl to express my feelings.
So I had no problem here. I had already proposed to my French teacher when I was in 9th standard. I
Oh,
said,
wow.
I was like, अरे normal तो नहीं था यार मैं तो so I had no problem punching above my
Did
weight.
you get into trouble for proposing to your French teacher?
No, I think my grades actually went up after that. So, but yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, like, look, Ambiga was a very conservative girl, and is a conservative
She
girl.
was also a tambram.
Yeah, she's a Tambram too. She basically would not, agree to date me till the end of the 4th year.
But you were pretty persistent and single-minded in your pursuit. And मतलब, someone else might have said कि ठीक है कोई और try करता हूँ, but you didn't.
That's been a constant theme with me. I do have some of those traits. I also felt that she liked me, but she could not say yes, even though she liked me. Because of various reasons. I don't know, instinct, whatever. I felt that she liked me. And eventually she did say that, because why don't you talk to my parents and if they agree. So she had written a complete algorithm. It was if, then, else, if, then, else, if. First you have to get a job, then you have to make sure that you have to talk to my father, then he has to agree. And then if we both write a GRE and we go to school, go to US, then both of us should go to US. Only one of us cannot go to US. And it was like a complete algorithm. That was, now thinking back, it looks interesting, but puts a smile on your face.
So you were doing computer science in Gundi.
It's Guindy actually. College of Engineering Guindy. I was doing electrical engineering. Both of us were doing electrical engineering. At the end of that, the best thing that happened I was one of the first people to be placed for campus. TCS had offered a job. The thing about that was then I could go and speak to Ambiga's mother. I didn't take up that job because both of us went to the United States to get our masters in electrical engineering.
Okay. So you both went to the same university only.
Initially, she went to a different university. It's called University of Maine, and I went to Wayne State University. But then where she went was extremely cold. So she decided to switch. And she was feeling very lonely. I don't know if you know United States, but Maine is next to it's in one corner. And it's very, very sparsely populated, very beautiful. But then she basically felt that, look, she was not able to take it there. And then she decided to move to Wayne State University. And I was a research assistant. So we had realized that if we got married, she would also get a tuition waiver. So we got married really, really early. So I got married when I was 22.
In Wayne State, then you did like an MS and then?
I did my master's in computer engineering. I quickly started working for PricewaterhouseCoopers. I worked initially as a systems programmer, then worked as a systems and business analyst. I did quite well there, became a principal very quickly, got promoted pretty much every year. And then I decided to get my MBA from University of Chicago, which is now called the Booz School of Business. Post University of Chicago, this is one of the worst times to graduate. The internet recession had just kicked in and we were coming out of that. And so getting the job.
This was after 9/11.
Yeah, after 9/11, everything was it was not an easy time. At least 2/3 of my class didn't have a job. So this is from University of Chicago. Typically every year, every person has 2 jobs.
Yeah, it's an Ivy League school, basically.
Ivy League school or whatever, So I decided I had got a job with Booz Hamilton as a management consultant. So I worked there for nearly 2 years.
And meanwhile, what was Ambiga doing?
Ambiga was always working at Motorola. She was a research engineer. She was a very talented programmer. She was working on, at that time, the basic infrastructure behind Bluetooth in the cell phones, all of those kind of things. That's what she was working on. Systems programming. Just when I was graduating from business school is when we had our child, Akash.
Okay, you were both in the same city only. Her job was in Chicago.
Management consulting does not have a city, right? So you are always flying out. We could live wherever her job was.
Okay. So how was the experience at Booz Allen as a management consultant?
It was a high-profile job. I liked it, but very quickly I realized that boss, मैं system के लिए बना नहीं. just system banana. I understood that I am not a consumer of a career. I'd rather be a producer of careers. मेरे को समझ आ गया था कि मेरा जो thought process है, I felt it needed freedom. That freedom of expression became very, very important for me.
Give me an example of like how some situation where you realize that you're not meant to be in a career. Like, did you, for example, see stuff which could be done better, but nobody was willing to listen to you, or what?
Yeah, there were many examples where I would feel like you could ask the question, why not? And do things very boldly. The system was willing to not take risks, and I was a younger guy. It meant that I had to get promoted over at least 2-3 levels before I could have a say in those kind of things. I just felt that I was not willing to wait. I think that freedom of expression became the motivating point.
When you decided that you want to do your own stuff, like, what was your situation like? Did you have money in the bank to fund it, and did you start it in the US, or describe to me that transition from Booz Allen into becoming an entrepreneur?
So first thing first is I am not a very I don't like to spend money. My needs are quite minimal. I think I grew up in a 1-bedroom house in Mumbai with my grandparents. Initial parts of our childhood was also difficult, lower middle class. I would save a lot of money. I think I would have saved easily $400,000 to $500,000 in the first 7-8 years.
And did you get a scholarship at Booth?
No, I didn't get a scholarship at Booth, but I got a scholarship at Wayne State. I was making a very good salary at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Booz Allen is obviously a high-profile job. In all of those times, no vacations. The only thing we would do is come back home and visit parents in India. And we had invested into a home and stuff like that. At some point of time when I really had that epiphany that I could strike out on my own, basically decided to put my own money actually. The initial funding for Mu Sigma was about $350,000 roughly, out of which I put about $275,000 of our own money and basically remortgaged the home and eventually sold it. I still have a picture of that home because that's the home that got sold to start Mu Sigma. We got started, and I'm really glad that I did that. I think it got started to some extent. I would say I was okay not having money eventually.
But you were a father at this stage, and so what did Ambiga feel about you putting all your collective life savings into starting off an entrepreneurial venture?
See, first of all, I think you have to understand Ambiga is quite an independent person. She had a job at Motorola, so she felt that worst come worst case, what is the thing? I mean, Dhiraj will not make money, that's okay. We really don't need so much. So that was one perspective. And second perspective is that I think she also knows, and I also know this, that I am not going to listen to anybody else. Freedom of expression, na, wo udhar wala jo janwar hai, wo kisi ka nahi sunega, boss. I was not going to listen to any boss. So she knew that about me, and I knew that eventually about myself. There was no other way. There was actually no other way but for me to go and do this. I feel like we think that we do things. I don't feel that's true. When people ask me, did you come up with the idea of Mu Sigma? I always say, I think the idea of Mu Sigma came to me. I think we are all just channels. If I am speaking to you right now and you're coming to me right now, I do think we're just channels for information, Information has its own mind and it wants to do its own thing. And I think if you study integrated information theory, you will realize that even you as a human being, as life, are nothing but information. You're carrying information. Carrying your great-grandfather's nose, maybe Genghis Khan's eyes.
Basically, you are just a DNA propagating machine.
Basically, DNA is nothing but encoded ontology of biological information. So let me put it that way, that you are just an information carrying, a temporary information carrying machine that has a purpose between 60 to 100 years or whatever, 50 to 100 years, who will eventually carry that information to the next level.
How did the Mu Sigma idea reach you? Or, when you were quitting, did you already have clarity on what you want to do? Or you just knew, I want to start something and I'm going to quit?
No, that was not the case. I think it was the idea of Mu Sigma that made me quit. I had no intention to quit Booz Allen. I was doing well. but the idea was so seductive. And the thought process of the idea in the beginning, it talked to me through different dimensions. The first dimension was that, hey, there's a different way to think about problem solving than how things are happening right now. So, वो एक theme था. The second theme, global delivery and globalization, is not just for cost arbitrage. It's for it could be for innovation arbitrage also. That was the second theme. Third theme, people just don't take enough chances. Innovation requires a certain kind of ecosystem, and building that ecosystem means you have to do a few things for organizations. For example, you want to make those organizations learning organizations. You want to make those organizations enjoy experiments and not be dependent on experts. You want those organizations to not keep secrets but share secrets. You want those organizations to understand that the new IP is interaction property. Basic some of these themes, what does it mean to get people to create a next generation way of thinking about problem solving, a new kitchen that can make new types of, and that was, those were all coming to me. Look, I have the advantage of time and words that will express myself better right now. But at that point of time, they were all coming in different ways to me. That's how it got started.
Could you give me examples of how these realizations came to you? So, for example, you said you want organizations that don't depend on experts. Was it because Booz Allen Hamilton typically comes in as an external expert and you felt that approach was wrong?
Hamilton is an amazing company, but it's a typical management consulting firm. And what I realized was all of these people in large Fortune 500 companies would ask us stuff that we didn't know anything about. Just because we would say it, they would feel good about it. And that's when I realized that good first principles thinking is so much valuable, but does not have an institutionalized way of making first principles thinking happen. So that was how.
So you were clear that profit is important and you want to make money, but what exactly was the business plan or the business idea that came to you, that this is what I will offer as a service?
The thought process was that the new kind of way of thinking about problem solving is important. All was there in the world. One way of thinking about problem solving was management consulting. I was there, so I had understood it. It's about taking what works in one place, having best practices and processes around that, and applying it in other places, right? So that's management consulting at a high level. The second one was information technology. IT was about using technology, computers applied on business to automate things and make things efficient. So that was the second way of thinking about problem solving. A variant of that was products, which was taking a specific problem, putting very specific technology for that problem with very minimal intervention of human beings, and then solving for that. But each of these, when you look at it, right, have their issues. Management consulting does not have science, technology, engineering, and math, and therefore is not very scalable. IT wants very clear requirements. The requirements keep changing, and the complexity of the organization is quite huge. Then it slows things down. Product, on the other hand, is meant for a specific purpose. If the purpose keeps changing in a world of higher uncertainty, products cannot be as flexible, right? So the thought process was, look, what is the one thing that continuously is increasing? And that's the second law of thermodynamics. It's entropy and uncertainty. So in a world which is going to have increasing uncertainty, you needed a more scalable way of thinking about problem solving. You needed a more agile way of thinking about problem solving. You needed a more flexible way of thinking about problem solving, which was something that needed aspects of all of these ways of thinking, but still was new. So in math, if you have a point and then you unroll that point, it becomes a line and the first dimension gets created. That line unrolls itself, it becomes like a square, and the second dimension gets created. The square unrolls itself, it becomes a cube. Every time this unrolling happens, a new dimension gets created. My perspective is that, look, I think that meant that there was something which had aspects of all of this, but was not any of this. There was a need for a new category that would solve for the increased entropy that we were all going to experience sooner, if not later. And that thought was so endearing for me. I could just think about that for a lot of time.
So, what was that new way of solving problems? I mean, I'm trying to pin you down on specifically what was the business idea.
The business idea was that, and a new way of thinking about problem solving included a future of interactions. And even now, we feel our time has not yet come. We are ahead of our time. So if you notice, first thing first is it's an original idea. It's not like if you are very simplistic about Mu Sigma, you'll think that it is an analytics company, but it's not actually. The way I see it is that the future of problem solving is interaction based and not entity based. Again, I'll give you an example. Okay, sorry, you have to bear with me a little bit.
Yeah, I also want you to explain interaction property.
So right now, you and I are talking. Okay. I am saying something, you're saying something. Both of us are entities, but there is something between us which is our interaction. That's where magic is. Na main hu, na tum ho. It is in the hum. It sits above you and me. So if you were to look at it, you have two dimensions, X and Y. The interaction of both of these dimensions is not felt in either of those dimensions. It's actually felt in the dimension Z, where it can see X and Y equally. There is no point in X and no point in Y which can see as much as a point in Z which can see X and Y. You see my point?
Yeah.
So now you take that thought process and you say that, okay, here is a world which is having more and more entropy, which is having higher volatility and ambiguity and complexity. And it is constantly becoming more and more afraid of risk-taking or more and more afraid of uncertainty. Innovation is nothing but accepted uncertainty. When you have uncertainty and you don't accept it, you go back to the status quo. And when you accept it, you go back to a new way of thinking. वो रंग दे बसंती में एक डायलॉग है ना, अगर एक प्रॉब्लम देखो तो कुछ करो, उसकी जिम्मेदारी उठाओ. That is not accept it. Decide what you want to accept and what you want to change. And by the way, this thought process actually is a very nice thing which happens as part of Alcoholics Anonymous, which actually they say the prayer goes something like this: God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So this perspective of courage to change the things that you can, comes from accepted uncertainty. And this new world of accepting uncertainty, being more friendly towards your Sigma, to prepare yourself for that. It can't happen by itself.
What do you mean by Sigma here? Being friendly?
Sigma is uncertainty. Basic things here, math mein. Everything about the world can be described between Mu and Sigma. It's about what your expectations are and how you are going to be surprised or disappointed by that. Mu is expectations. So let's say you want to make a decision in the world. To make a decision, you need to have an expectation or an answer, and you need to know with what confidence you can believe in that answer. That comes from Mu and Sigma.
Mu statistically means average, right?
Statistically means, average, expectation, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. An average sets your expectation, right? So the thinking here is like, look, this future means that you need a combination of interaction property is going to become more important. For example, the future of problem solving is not that you have a marketing problem or a product problem or a sales problem or a supply chain problem. You have a problem that's an interaction of all of those things. The future of problem solvers is not that you have a business analyst, you have an applied mathematician, you have a programmer, you have a design thinker. You have an interaction of all of those kind of things. I'll give an example, right? If you were to look at cricket, I love cricket, so I'll give you a cricket analogy. Dekho, ab kya ho raha hai? And first I'll start with the business perspective, where the world is going from bigger is better to faster is better. So it's going from this perspective of economies of scale, economies of speed. Organizations are being tested on how responsive they are going to be towards various things that's happening around them. Now, look at it from a cricket analogy. Cricket mein kya ho raha hai? Pehle tha test cricket. 5 din khel rahe the. It was a 2 innings game. It was really a test of making things happen over a long period of time. You had very specialists. You had a wicket keeper who was a specialist. You had batsmen who were specialists. You had a few all-rounders, and you had like specialist bowlers, right? And then it became one-day cricket. And in one-day cricket, the advent of the all-rounder became very important. The wicketkeeper became wicketkeeper batsman. You had Gilchrist coming in, and the Test cricket was like people like Marsh and Kirmani. And you had in one day cricket, you had Gilchrist and Dhoni. And then you had 2020, which compressed the game to a few hours. And in that, you pretty much every person had to do many things. Wicketkeeper obviously was a wicketkeeper batsman, and you had to take chances very differently than how you would take even in one day cricket. The game shifted quite a bit towards taking chances, towards trying new ways of hitting the ball that would considered blasphemy in one day cricket or in test cricket. And it eventually changed one day cricket and test cricket too, because having 2020 meant that the scoring was going to follow a different rhythm in one day cricket and was going to follow a different rhythm in test cricket. So this perspective of that this game became a game of producers of optionality. An all-rounder is nothing but a producer of optionality.
Yeah, you have multiple options with him.
Multiple options you can do with him. What does a world of uncertainty need? It needs optionality. Right? So a world of higher uncertainty meant that you needed organizations themselves to be producers of optionality, and you need organizations to have a problem-solving kitchen that was going to be producers of optionality. So risk lena zaruri hai. जो डर गया वो मर गया, गब्बर वाला डायलॉग. So that became actually a business perspective, that जो डर गया वो मर गया. It was not mu shunning sigma. It was mu seeking sigma. Why? Because in the past, you were in the business of predictability. You had a factory, you wanted the same product. You had Six Sigma, which was all about reducing sigma. You had methods that you would put in place, which was about reducing uncertainty. In the future, in a world of higher entropy, it was a world of embracing uncertainty through optionality. And this meant that this new kind of kitchen was a combination of people, processes, and platform. That was an interaction property. It was not going to be the Superman, which was going to be an all-encompassing person. It was not going to be the robot, which is a machine. It was the Iron Man. Man interacting with machine. And it was going to be a place where math, business, technology was going to interact with each other. And it meant that you needed to see problem solving, not just from a perspective of analysis, but also from a perspective of synthesis, which is bringing things together. And uske liye soch different, chahiye tha. That's what I would say was the core concept of the idea of Mu Sigma.
Okay. So how was Mu Sigma creating options? You essentially explained to me that Mu Sigma's offering to a client was that you would create options to help them deal with uncertainty. So how exactly did that happen?
It came down to just one word was, okay? And that one word is abundance. An abundance mindset is required. Is there abundance in knowledge, or is there abundance in learning? And then when you see that now, very quickly you realize that the abundance exists in learning. Right? So is there, I'll reframe this to you with a little bit negative perspective. Is there abundance in knowledge, or is there abundance in ignorance? There is actually abundance in discovery of ignorance, which is nothing but learning.
Right. Okay.
Right? So unless you are friendly with your ignorance and smiling at that ignorance beautifully and seeking to discover it more, know what you don't know, and then figure out how you can know more about it, that perspective becomes learning. It meant that first principles thinking and understanding learning by looking inward and looking outward is going to become important. Learning by looking inward is meant that you have to look at your data, you look at what is happening, you look at your transaction data, you're looking at this thing. Even in spirituality, when you look inward, you're watching your breath. So all of that is just having an appreciation for kya ho raha hai, usse kya seekh sakte ho. Looking outward, what's happening with customers, what's happening with markets, what's happening, again, looking at data, all of these kind of things. And it's not just looking at data, interacting with technology and building data lakes, building databases and data lakes and data engineering, interacting with applied mathematics, building data science.
What do you mean by data lake? Sorry, I'm not from a data science.
When you collect a lot of these data, right, and you put it in one place, think of it in a simple manner like that. So it's a database, okay? Think of it that way. So data, the first part is just making the data sit in one place or collecting new kinds of data. All of that forms, or creating data when data does not exist. All of that comes in this perspective of data engineering. Data engineering, when it interacts with applied mathematics, that becomes data science. And data science, when it interacts with business thinking, problem space, all of those things, it becomes decision science. So again, as the level of interactions increase, it becomes more and more useful. Just like the coffee seeds, when it interacts with water, it becomes the coffee decoction. The coffee decoction, when it interacts with milk, it becomes a coffee. When you put a little bit of essence, vanilla, sugar, everything in it, it becomes a very different product. So you see this transformation occurs as more and more interaction takes place. You and me are just higher interaction of the algae that we originally were. It's not a new concept. It was there in nature all the time. So this perspective of seeing things as interactions become very, very important. And it meant that for these organizations, you needed them to have a perspective of this new kind of problem solvers who are a combination of business analyst, an applied mathematician, and a programmer, which means a new kind of talent had to be created. You needed new kinds of technology who will work with that new kind of talent, which meant that prefabricated algorithms needed to be created, prefabricated machines needed to be created. You needed an entire Iron Man suit for this new Tony Stark that was getting created. And you kind of needed new training, new processes, all of these kind of things. New processes, new people, and new platforms, building a new way of thinking about problem solving. I think it's quite audacious. There is an audaciousness around that. It was not like, I'll build an Uber for India or I'll build an Amazon for India. There's something about originality that has, hope more and more things in India will be more original.
So if I was to put in a little bit of layman language on what you wanted to create, it was like a management consulting 2.0, which was more driven by data.
This is the problem. We don't want to really understand things. We want to represent the future as some version of our past. That's kind of like saying Rajinikanth is the Amitabh Bachchan of South India. Madrasis will look at you and says that Chennaiites will dekho yaar, ye North Indians isliye humko, we have a problem with them. Right? So,
See, we live in a world where labels work. And how would you have sold this to a client? You could not have.
I actually think that, human beings, clients are first human beings, right? And then they are clients. And they appreciate originality. Jab Amir Khan ne Lagan banaya, agar if he had thought that it was going to be मेले में दो लोग खो जाएंगे और एंड में मिलेंगे, मैं वही मूवी बनाता हूँ, but राजस्थान में वो बनाऊंगा, right? और गुजरात में बनाऊंगा. If he thought of Lagan as the Ammar Akbar Anthony of rural Gujarat, so how would you feel about that? I think he trusted the world. He trusted his audience. And he said, look, I'm not going to underestimate them. I think we underestimate people, boss. People are capable of so much. There's abundance. The abundance mindset is that you don't give up on your people. You don't give up on your customer base. They will rise up to the level that you can allow them to rise up. Akshay, there is a difference between being simple and being simplistic. And that's a very, very careful thing that you want to not fall into the trap of, boss.
Yeah. Like Gandhi would have strived for being simple.
Yeah, but he was a very, very complex human being. For him, understood that non-violence as a theme was simple, but it had put a lot of thoughts in it. It became a way of life for him. Concentrated a lot of things into it. That was his, it was an essence.
Yeah, being simple is tough. Being simplistic is actually simple.
That's what I'm saying. When our mind doesn't want to engage, we become simplistic. So this is a management consulting of 2.0. When I kind of made you exercise your brain becoming hard, that's when you succumb to that. You know what I'm saying?
No, I was also thinking of my listeners who may not be so willing to exercise the brain so much.
Look, I think why give up on them so fast?
Point.
Hopefully.
Okay. So tell me about your pitch to the first few clients. Like, what did you pitch to them? I mean, at the end of the day, you needed to make money, for which you needed to pitch something specific to a client for which he would pay you money. So what was that like? How did you like get the first deal, so to say?
Yeah, frankly, actually, the idea was also evolving with me. And I'm still evolving, and therefore the idea is still evolving. It understood that a new dimension was needed, and the dimension of math was needed on business and technology. And we would bring more math to the table. So, and Microsoft was our first customer. My first customer was a 14th employee of Microsoft, Jim Minavino. Jim saw me as this 28-year-old kid who was jumping up and down. And I guess he felt sorry for me or more than anything else. And he was kind, I think, to me. I would say more than anything else. He gave us an opportunity.
How did you reach him? Like, how did you get a chance to present in front of him?
I called him.
Okay. As in, you got his number from somebody and just called him, or you called the board line and he agreed to speak to you, or like?
He was leading a group called Consumer Market Research and Insights. And that was kind of Microsoft's learning ecosystem, learning organization, and what was happening in the world. And I reached out to him, and he was kind enough to. I had a friend who was a professor at University of Georgia, and he was a marketing professor. And he basically connected us, and then we just talked about this new way of thinking, and he liked it. So bas ho gaya.
What was the pilot
I
project?
think it was something to do with segmenting, Microsoft customers for a certain set of their products and seeing what was happening, in their net promoter score and stuff like that. It's something very simple, not a very complex one.
Okay. And then how did that eventually scale up? Like, how did you get to the second client, the third client? And, tell me about like
There's no secret sauce here, like Kung Fu Panda mein bolta hai na. So there's no secret sauce. But such bolo, tell the customers exactly what you want to do, what your dreams are, what you can do. Don't sell them what your past is. Sell them your future. Because they are interested in their future and your future. And talk about what the future could be with the perspective of why not. And that's what we did. Every place that we talked, we went and spoke, interacted, engaged with them.
like I want to know more details. Like for the Microsoft project, was it like a one-man show that was there at that time? Were you alone executing it, or did you build up a team? Or like when did you start to build up a team? When did you decide that you want to build the team in India? Because you were in the US at that time. So tell me about that.
For the first 9 months of Mu Sigma was a one-man show. We didn't have anybody in the company. So I quit Booz Allen in 2004 September, incorporated Mu Sigma in December 2004.
And when did Microsoft deal happen?
I think it happened, the start of the interaction started around March, April, and we started working on it sometime in June.
June 2005.
Yeah, June 2005. And we built our team sometime in August 2005 in India. So it was like a little bit of me doing a little bit. I call myself the 0th employee.
Okay. So those 6 months, like you incorporated in December and you got the deal somewhere in May, June. What were you doing in that period, like before the deal happened?
I was just talking to a lot of people, boss. I was talking to everybody and anybody about the thought process, the idea. I always, either you could be a customer of Mu Sigma, or you could be an employee of Mu Sigma, or you could be an investor of Mu Sigma. So I never let a chance to talk about Mu Sigma go away. It's just I was hungry to talk about the idea, and I'm still. What I find fascinating is that I'm still quite hungry to talk about it. It was easy for me to talk about the idea. The company was just a put of the idea. So the idea is more important than the company.
Okay. And why did you decide to build a team in
First
India?
thing first, I think I'm from India. That was important. Second thing was I realized that India has an abundance of raw material, and therefore in people. And therefore you could mold them and build new kinds of talent quite well out here.
The Iron Man that you wanted to build.
Exactly. The Iron Man that I wanted to build, the new kind of Tony Stark with processes and with talent. India was already proven itself to the world that it was good with technology. We have a good history of math. Maybe not as high as the Russians and the French, but still we're good. So I felt that this could be an interesting place to start this from.
Okay. And by the end of first year, 31st March 2006, how much revenue did you make? Or after Microsoft, when did the next deal come
I
about?
think if I remember, I might get this wrong, but I think it was like my first year's revenue was, I think if I remember, I had 300 to $400,000. Next year was about $1.3 million. The year after that was $4.5 million. The year after that was about $13 million. The year after that was 26, 42, 66, 93, 126, 166, and that's the way it went.
Okay. And what was this year which just ended, 31st March
So
2020?
we probably do about 160, 170 million. This is COVID year, so it's a very difficult year. I think we are looking to shoot for, I mean, I'm talking about 2021 right now. Next year, you should expect us to be in the 150, $160 million range. I'm not so sure because given the current scenario, I think it would be very hard to talk about revenues today. These are difficult, really, really difficult times. The nature of our business from a long-term perspective is that the more the uncertainty, more the people have questions,
Essentially, this is your core offering. Like
Yeah.
you built Mu Sigma to help companies deal with
Correct.
uncertainty. I mean, this is what you built the
So I
company
also
for.
had a setback in Mu Sigma. Me and Ambiga got separated.
So before we come to that, first let's go back to those early years. So you would doing 4x of your previous year's revenue for the first couple of years. How did that happen? Like, was it very high referrals and therefore customers chasing you and getting signed up, or was it like you were extremely evangelical and going out and getting customers?
I was like traveling like crazy. I was traveling about 200 days a year. I used to live between two continents. I had also abused my own health quite a bit. I was like 220, 230 pounds. I'm not a very tall guy. I'm like 5 feet 8 inches. So I was very unhealthy at one point. But I think the company was doing so well. We got recognized Forbes 40 under 40, Economic Times Entrepreneur of the Year. We built kind of, some would say, India's first unicorn. We got recognition from all the venture capital firms. It was a great first many years.
How were the clients coming in? Was it referrals or was it you going out?
Combination. Sab tha, or it was a combination. There's never one thing was.
When did Ambiga join the business?
She joined after about 5 years. I think around 2005, maybe 2009 or 2000. Yeah, sometime around that time she would join. I think 5 years. 5 years after we got started, we were just sitting and we won a new client and he was looking around and saying, "Abhi kisko hire kare?" And he said, "Why don't you join?" So that's how it got started. And I think the company was doing well. That it's not so bad to do that.
Okay. You were still in the US when Ambiga joined?
Yeah. So we lived in the US till 2010. I mean, it was always a multi-continental life for me personally. So either I was living in the US and traveling to India half the time, or I was living in India and traveling to US all the time.
All your customers were in US and the delivery center was
All the
India.
customers were initially in US, then later Europe got started, and now Australia, China, everything, Middle East.
I'd like to learn from you, and what would help our listeners also is in terms of how high value B2B sales happens, because I mean you are essentially in a B2B business which you scaled up extremely fast at like 4x revenues each year. So how does high value B2B sales happen? And what did you learn about making that happen?
Well, the first thing first is there's no one way to do this. Okay, so don't whatever I say, take it with a pinch of salt. I can tell you how we did it. I think the first thing is these large B2B businesses are, as much as you think about them as organizations, you got to think about them as organisms. They have their own life. They, while they are trying to solve complex problems, they have complexity as a problem. What I mean by that is that they're not trying to, the problem that they say that they have may not be the problem that they actually have. It may have started somewhere else. So think of it like, a child who comes to home and says, I'm hungry. He says, I am hungry. He doesn't say, I want Mysore masala dosa. Right? So you have to say, okay, do you want idli? And you say, no. Do you want dosa? Maybe. Do you want pancake? No. Then you want salty stuff or sweet stuff? Salty stuff. And you want, okay, can I make masala dosa for you? Yeah. What kind of masala dosa? I don't know. So that's how the interaction is, right? So that perspective of engaging becomes really, really important. Knowing very well that the customer can never tell you what he actually wants. So you have to give him what he needs, not what he wants. So that becomes a very important perspective of listening and engaging with the customer with a combination of humility and irreverence. Humility about the fact that, yeah, you don't know a lot of things, but irreverence about the fact that you can solve many things. So that duality has to be there in people who are shaping these kind of relationships. Don't engage with them with the perspective of selling. Engage with the perspective of shaping. Right? There's a difference between shaping and selling. Be generous. Exchange information. You have to want to exchange, learnings and information. Things may come, things may not come. Right? But long term, it'll be good. So do not be transaction oriented, be relationship oriented. So, and that perspective meant that we were engaging in the art of problem solving rather than solving specific problems alone. So this was the way we would engage in the initial years of Mu Sigma.
Like every interaction with a client, you would try your best to add some value to them by giving information or sharing insights.
Yeah, sharing what's happening in the world, what they could be doing, what we can learn from them. If you learn something, then give them credit for that. And be willing to say these three beautiful words which people don't say enough, which is I don't know, right?
हाँ, बिल्कुल, I agree
वो
with you.
लोग बोलते नहीं है बॉस, एंड हमें कुछ ना कुछ बोलना है, राइट? अगर उसके बारे में पता भी नहीं है तो कुछ ना कुछ तो हमें बोलना है. What I call it look-alike model करके.
What does that mean, look-alike model?
Basically, if you say, hey, see something new like a dim sum, and you've never seen a dim sum, so you call it like oh, this is a samosa, No, this is not a management consulting 2.0. It's a new thing. so anyway, sorry,
I asked for it.
So, but hey, I think if we can't laugh at ourselves, then what else was? It's boring. That becomes very, very important.
So that is one part of like creating memorable interactions, but also then the other part is like the tactical part. How do you open doors? How do you get to meet decision makers and stuff like that? Like, is there any insight that you want to share on
I
that?
think, look here, the idea will carry itself here. I am not a believer. If you have a good idea and you engage with it with honesty and you're sincere about things, the idea will carry itself.
Okay. Were you good at networking, or rather, are you good at networking?
No, actually, I'm not. Frankly, I'm quite an introvert. I like spending time by myself quite a bit. There are people and ideas on which I can engage quite passionately, but that doesn't mean that I'm like a people. If I don't like something, this is not me. I'm not that. So I do think that I didn't believe in networking, boss. I think उसमें सच्चाई नहीं है, boss.
हाँ, that's true.
वो ऑथेंटिक नहीं है, उसमें झूठ है, एंड जिसमें भी झूठ है ना वो चलता नहीं है बस. I think our ancient philosophy had this perspective of Satyam Shivam Sundaram.
What does that mean?
At the most simple level, I could think of it as the truth is God and God is beautiful, right? That's like one way of thinking about it. But then when you truly understand ancient Hinduism, not as a religion, but as an old science, you will get to appreciate the fact that Shiva is also a representation of entropy. He is the god of transformation. He is misunderstood as a god of destruction. So if you look at the perspective of Shiva and Shakti, It is basically, it constantly interacts with energy, entropy and energy. The first law of thermodynamics is that energy is conserved. The second law of thermodynamics is that entropy will always increase. The interaction of entropy and energy, Shiva and Shakti, is a very important perspective. So when you look at it from that perspective, what you're basically saying, the truth is in transformation, and it is constantly seeking newer and newer things. What am I trying to say here? I think this perspective of seeking the truth, and when you look at the truth, it has all the things that you know and all the things that you don't know. Between all the things that you know and all the things that you don't know lies the truth. If the union of that is the truth, then comes the point: what is the intersection of that? What is the intersection of all the things that you don't know and all the things that you know? Well, it cannot have an intersection because it's kind of like saying that I know this and I don't know. You can't have it anything. So it's basically the intersection of that is a point, right? It's a point which touches each other. What you know and what you don't know, the point that touches each other is that point of learning. उस छोटा point में everything happens that differentiates the past and the future. And that point is the present. If it is lived authentically, it becomes a point of learning. And when it is not lived authentically, it can never be a point of learning. And by the way, all of us get into these traps of inauthenticity. I mean, I also get into these traps. Our ego kind of fuddles our mind up.
What's an example of this, like a trap of inauthenticity?
Simple things like this: networking करो यार, उसको जाके मिलो, हे हो करो, एक wine glass लेके हंसो. You have no freaking you care about his family, but you ask, how's your father, how's your mother? क्या है ये? And the other thing in meetings, have you noticed? They will always start with how's the weather. What a stupid way to start a conversation. Saying, it's a very, because world is filled with these perspectives of inauthenticity. Being real is hard for everybody. We fill it up with these things which actually have no meaning, frankly. They create noise. They're not signal. And what you see in today's world is that the rate of increase of data is very high, but the rate of increase of noise is much, much higher than the rate of increase of signal. And therefore, the rate of increase of confusion is quite high because that is noise minus signal.
So coming back to those early days, so when did you build up like a sales organization and people who were going out and doing those sales? I assume first 2-3 years you must have been the primary salesperson for the company.
I still think that analyst, I am a salesperson. I am the designer for the office. I am the janitor in the toilet. I think founders should ever give themselves a role. I am the CEO, the chief entertainment officer in the company. So I don't think of myself as the chief executive officer. But I think that's how I see the world. Perspective of roles and responsibilities are like clothes, you got to wear it very lightly. It's not your skin. It's not your flesh. It's not your bones. So I think you got to wear it over your skin and flesh and bones. But we had a few people who would go talk to people, and I guess they were performing the function of sales in the beginning. It naturally evolved. We still don't have a really professional sales team, boss, in Mu Sigma. Because we have problem solvers. I think that's what we have in the organization.
So instead of like looking at building a sales team, you built a team of problem solvers who went out to seek problems.
I think that all of our people are problem solvers. When you look at it that way, all of our people are salespeople, all of our people are technology people, all of our people are delivery people. I think that's how I always viewed the world. Mera world view wo hai. See, if you notice, but that's also part of our philosophy. It's a no experts philosophy. It's experimentation more than experts. Interaction property, again, if you notice it.
So what's your learning on building a team? Like, I think becoming a unicorn definitely needs a very, very good team to make that happen. So, how did you build your team?
I don't think I built my team. I think my team built me. That's how I would say.
So the team discovered you the same way as the idea discovered.
The team discovers me. They look at it. They like the idea. They look at this crazy guy. And they hang around you. And that's how things evolve, actually. I think saying that you build a team is, again, a very bombastic perspective, which I don't want to keep. So the team builds you actually, not you build a team. Actually, you can only be authentic, and people will come around you. Some people will like you in the beginning, they may not like you later. Some people will not like you initially, then they'll like you later. Because life is also constantly entropy and Shiva happening, right? So वही होता है boss. People are also going through their own journeys. Na? They may like you when you are succeeding. They may not like you as much when you're going through a tough time. So I think all of that happens, boss.
Okay. And as a boss, are you like the kind of boss who is instructive, like giving instructions, or are you the kind of boss who is very hands off and more of a like a friend and a mentor rather than a boss?
I think in sports terms, I'm at like a teammate. I want to be solving the problem with you. I love Dhoni. So you're playing the game with them. You got to engage with them. This perspective of like hierarchical world of like one guy, then five guys reporting to him, and then five guys reporting to those each five guys. That's not the way the problem solving world actually happens. I always joke that companies think that they are raviolis, but actually they turn out to be spaghettis.
What can you explain?
So वो ravioli होता है ना, Italian dish है. So it's like balls की तरह होता है. There's a marketing ball, there's a sales ball, there is a this ball.
Okay.
That's how the world view of them is. Like ये होता है, the rules होता है बस. But that's not the way companies function. Companies function like spaghetti. So सब इधर जा start करता है, उधर end करता है. It's all twisted. So
got it.
So that's the reality. I believe the future is not a boss. The future is a teammate, and it's a networked world. Everything will become networks. So I always say that there's a leadership team in Music Bar, and that's working together. We get into a call. Many times with that call, there's not a very strict agenda. The agenda gets decided in the call, and we talk about shit. But at the same time, we keep it real, right, as much as possible. That's how I would say. I think most real founders will always be like that, boss. I think they're not thinking like a boss. But we have a team called the Founders Office, and that group is like about 10 people across all levels. And it has some trainee decision scientists in it. It has some apprentice leaders, and it has everybody. So we are kind of engaging and like making things happen, and so on and so forth.
So 2011, you did your first fundraise. What was the need for the fundraise? Like, was the business not B2B services companies typically generate enough cash, right? I mean,
honestly speaking, actually, this company never needed funding, boss.
Yeah, I mean, B2B services, so I imagine, it would not have. Yeah.
See, sometimes what happens now, entrepreneurs are also human beings, and we want to seek validity. And sometimes, and when you don't need money is when money will run and come to you.
True.
ये बड़े लोग सब आ जाते हैं, बोलते हैं नहीं यार, हमारे साथ तुम आ जाओ यार, हम ये करेंगे वो करेंगे, and like you also want you also see all these newspapers are only looking at valuation and funding and this and that, so you get into these kind of ego traps, boss. I guess I was also seeking validity. That's how it happened. Multiple rounds of funding happened. Most of the funding that Mu Sigma has done is secondary capital, which means that some investor sold it to some other investor who sold it to some other investor. That was what was happening.
Okay. And the MasterCard Fidelity investment 2013, that was also secondary.
Sub-secondary tha, boss. Sub-secondary tha. Pura, for a long time.
It was largely, the stake was largely with you before you did the fundraise? Like you were the, between you and Ambiga, I assume it would have been.
Yeah, obviously. What was mine was hers anyway.
So when did the distance start coming in between you and Ambiga? This happened after you shifted to India, right?
It's a very personal thing. I don't know how much I want to get into it. I was going through a time where I was just 40 and I was going through my personal demons, I would say. Some would say, it was depression, whatever,
But why were you depressed? I mean, you had a fast growing.
ऐसे कुछ नहीं है बहुत. I think people, यही होता है ना लोग ना. Sometimes you things happen which you cannot explain by saying that, ये हुआ because of this, that हुआ. You cannot explain this in that manner. I mean, because the mind has its own mind, if I may say. Right? So, usko simplistic mat mat banao please, right? Because it's not so easily explainable to anybody, even to oneself. I was going through my journey, and we just were, if I may, the distance was building up, and I first talked about with her. The first time I talked about it was December 2015, and we had got separated by March 2016, and it was not an easy one. It was difficult. Care deeply for her. She's and it didn't feel bad. Well, that's what happened, but that put a lot of strain on the company.
Why is that?
Because she wanted to take her money out. So I had to take about $250 million. I didn't even have a lawyer on my side. I just gave it to her. That meant that I had to deal with the current investors. I had to do a dividend recap. A lot of strain on the operating ecosystem.
Okay, so you had to take that cash out of the business, basically.
Yeah, I had to take cash out of the business. I had to take a loan. There were a lot of people who were senior management decided that they didn't want to be part of. And so it became hard.
As in, people quit in the leadership team.
Yeah, there were a lot of people who quit, but it's okay. It's that's life.
Okay, so I think then you also raised additional funds around 2017. That was partly for this only, like the cash that you took out.
Yeah, it was mostly debt. We did a round of debt. We recapitalized the company, gave some cash out to investors and Ambiga. So I got more control of the company. And by 2018, we started rebuilding the company. So we had like a 2016 and 17 were the hard years for the company. 2018 was when we got settled. 2018, 19 was the rebuilding years. And then now it's 2020 and we are in COVID. But the good part is pretty much have a flat COVID. A flat COVID can be called a growth year any day.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And what is the split of your revenue now between US and Europe and India?
It's about maybe 60-70% United States, and the remaining is the rest of the world.
What are like Mu Sigma is a highly desirable employer. Like a lot of people have Mu Sigma as a dream company to work for. And what are some of the things that people in the industry, I spoke to some people that I'm interviewing you, and they said, "Oh wow," and so there's a lot of respect for Mu Sigma.
I appreciate that. The most interesting thing I would say is opportunities to learn, boss. We understood that real learning happens when you are problem solving. The canvas of the problems and the canvas of talent, where that battlefield happens, right? That's where learning happens. Again, interaction. You see, the theme is this. If the word interaction was not in my language, I would have a lot of difficulty. So, the perspective is that we have an amazing canvas of problems, seen with abundance. We have amazing paint and brush, paint of talent, which is again in abundance in India. If you see them as raw material, we have amazing technology and processes in the brushes and paint and all of those things that we slowly accumulated and built. And on this canvas is the painting. Sometimes it's paper oil painting. Sometimes it's watercolors. Sometimes it's this. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's with pencil. Sometimes it's got lots of various kinds of problems, various kinds of data, various kinds of complexity, various kinds of technology. And we are producers of optionality, embracing risk. So that creates like this rich ecosystem of that actually builds talent. More than 10 internet companies in India which are doing very, very well. And the head of analytics for most of them is a Mu Sigma. There's a lot of people who are proud to say ex Mu Sigma. They go on to interesting things. But it has its problems also because like people like Amazon and Google and all these guys, they just wait for us to build talent and poach our people. So constantly we are like building talent. Initially it was frustrating, but now I've understood that our place in the world is the place of a ladder. A ladder should not complain about all the people who are going up. That perspective, it took time.
And you generally prefer to hire people fresh out of college because you can then mold them the way you want.
I generally like the people hired fresh. They can be fresh out of college. They can be fresh out of a company. They can be... Okay. But if they're not fresh, it's a problem. Because the whole company is built on first principles thinking, boss. दुनिया में बहुत सड़े हुए चीज होती है, and they carry a lot of their baggage. thinking of the world as samosa is a dim sum of Punjab. So, so I think, Firni is not ice cream. The perspective of fresh thinking and seeing the space open. I would like to say that we like to hire fresh thinkers. If they happen to be more young, that's just where we find the most freshness. But that's what we seek.
What are the levels at which you ask, who am I? Like, one could be like a very superficial level of who am I? Like, I am a, let's say, a founder of Mu Sigma could be one, or
If you continue to ask the question, "Who am I?" you will be forced to go deep. You can be the most superficial person. You can be like the most shallow person in the world, but you just continue to ask the question, "Who am I?" And you will you will have to eventually realize that you're not this, and then you kind of get that perspective of you're not Akshay or Dhiraj, you're not molecules, you're not the cells, or you're not the atoms. Then who are you? This perspective that you are what you see, you are what you measure, becomes the Schrodinger's cat equation, and which means that mind is such a big part and a power of the self, and it is spawning thoughts like that's what is creating this perspective around us. So sorry, I didn't mean to get philosophical on you.
no, 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 not at all. Okay. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what you just said.
I'm still right. I'm still trying to wrap my
So,
head around that also. I'm with you.
okay.
So there was a very nice saying Feynman used to say about quantum physics, and he got the Nobel Prize for that, right? So he said, if you really understand if you really studied quantum physics and know about quantum physics, you'll know that you don't know enough about quantum physics.
Yeah, right. True, true. Who are some of your heroes? Like some of the people that you admire
I
deeply?
think so. I like my primary hero is my grandfather. It's just an amazing, resilient human being who's very simple. He lived his entire life working as a typist in Times of India. Saw so many problems. Lost his son, lost his wife. Was a father figure to me when I needed it. My grandfather is a big part. Then I like scientists. Einstein is a huge influence on like just that thought experiment perspective. I love a huge bunch of scientists, but Einstein for me is special. Uh, just because of how he could rethink the universe and challenge Newton. I said this to my friend sometime back. The best of the scientists left the world wrong, and when they left the world, they were wrong about something, but they made the world more right than when they came in. That perspective is quite beautiful, that you move the world towards seeking the truth, more truth, and that, in my mind, is spiritual. And that journey that you allowed our species to take, right? So
What about Gandhi? Are you like a fan of Gandhi also?
I love Gandhi from a perspective of how he abstracted his entire learnings into this one concept of nonviolence, and how he took pain that he felt in South Africa and came back to India and did something about with it instead of like being a victim. So that's something I love about Gandhi. I love to see some common themes around them. And then we like to put characters around the themes. The theme is more important. These people are just like housing those characteristics, if I may say.
So, if there was a Bollywood movie made on your life, what kind of movie would that be?
Struggle.
Would you imagine Amir Khan playing you?
He's
Like,
too good looking, yeah. Yeah. but he's very good at changing his weight, right? so, but, so I think I would say the theme would be struggle, and I think I have this. I don't know if you've ever seen. I keep this in my notes all the time. I call it this about the struggle. Have you read it?
no, I haven't. Could you tell me what it is?
Yeah, I can actually just quickly read it to you. I mean, I can decide whether you want to use it or not. It says about the struggle. It's written by this. It starts by saying that life is a struggle by Karl Marx. It was written by, I think, Ben Horowitz. The struggle is when you wonder why you started the company in the first place. The struggle is when people ask you why you don't quit and you don't know the answer. The struggle is when your employees think that you are lying and you think they may be right. The struggle is when food loses its taste. The struggle is when you don't believe you should be the CEO of your company. The struggle is when you know that you are in over your head and you know that you cannot be replaced. The struggle is when everybody thinks you're an idiot, but nobody will fire you. The struggle is where self doubt becomes self hatred. The struggle is when you are having a conversation with someone and you can't hear a word that they are saying because all you can hear is the struggle. The struggle is when you want the pain to stop. The struggle is unhappiness. The struggle is when you go on vacation to feel better and you feel worse. The struggle is when you're surrounded by people and you are all alone. The struggle has no mercy. The struggle is the land of broken promises and crushed dreams. The struggle is the cold sweat. The struggle is where your guts boil so much that you feel like you are going to spit blood. The struggle is not failure, but it causes failure, especially if you're weak. Always, if you're weak.
Amazing. I love that. What would you call it? A poem or a
It's just a small,
piece of writing? So I am struggling to end this. I don't want it to end, but I also know that I'm sure you have other stuff planned out. I had time till 6 o'clock with you. So any words of advice to people who are thinking of becoming entrepreneurs? And I'll put this as my last question to you.
Becoming an entrepreneur is less important than being entrepreneurial, right? Um, I think many people feel that, I call it like, I have to become an entrepreneur. You don't have to become an entrepreneur. You have to be entrepreneurial, and if the idea requires you to become an entrepreneur, become one. If your idea requires you to help somebody be a better entrepreneur, do that. It's the ideas that are the heroes. Script hero है boss, right? I think वो फोकस होनी चाहिए कि स्क्रिप्ट हीरो है, right? अगर सबको हीरो बनना है ना, perspective is not the roles. An entrepreneur is like is the perspective of building the enterprise. That is more important. The verb form of it, the enterprisingness form of it is more important than being an entrepreneur. So that's how I would see it. And if the idea pushes you towards it, yeah, embrace it. Be open to it. Don't presuppose that you have to be one. And that, I think that's why we have so much noise around this ecosystem, where there are people who wanted to become entrepreneurs rather than wanted to solve problems and come up with and new ways of thinking, new ideas, and so on and so on. Let the idea guide you.
And do you ever see yourself moving on from Mu Sigma? And if yes, then what would you be doing?
No.
Okay, so Mu Sigma for life.
That's what I want to do. I don't know if the world will allow me to do. The world has to allow me to do that. I can only do my part. But I guess someday either I'll have a biological problem, or I'll have a physical problem, or a fiscal problem, or I'll have some problem. कोई तो कोई bouncer तो लगेगा मुझे भी, right? थोड़ा तो लगा है अभी भी, but I think it's not. I think it's not. I'm still. We're doing well right now, and I'm super excited about all the possibilities.
But at the same time, you have a feeling of insecurity that doing well will not continue forever.
Absolutely, boss. अभी भी मेरे को डर है, right? I think insecurity is what keeps you awake here. So वो थोड़ा, that is important. That's that's not a bad thing to have. You want to have that edge with you. You don't want to say that अभी सब हो गया है boss करके. I think there is so much. I feel there is so much more for Mu Sigma, and I feel we are like like Bezos would say, we are still day one. कुछ भी नहीं किया है.
So that was Dhiraj talking about his journey and the way he thinks about life, business, problem solving, and building a unicorn. Dhiraj is a big movie buff, and we can't wait for the day when Bollywood decides to make a movie on his life. Although, knowing Dhiraj, we'd probably struggle to give the movie a label. If you like the Founder Thesis podcast, then do check out our other shows on subjects like marketing, technology, career advice, books, and drama. Visit thepodium.in, that is thepodium.in, for a complete list of all our shows.